I have been fascinated by mental health irregularities and what people call crazy since I can remember. In criminal law, as a lawyer, prosecutor, dealing with mental health issues and, quote, insanity vis-a-vis criminal justice concerns, I'm fascinated by it. I'm also interested in when the state, the government, can come in and say you are so crazy that you pose a threat to yourself or others or somebody else, and we are going to shut down your ability to be free, to freely exercise your normal volition. We're going to seize your assets in a conservatorship, as they call it in California. We consider you to be a, quote, threat to yourself or others, and we're going to move in. Now, if you don't see the potential, the absolute potential for excessive abuse of this, then you're not paying attention. Now, there's a story I see all the time. Brittany Spears fans are concerned over Brittany Spears. Her behavior, what she wears, how she acts in front of her kids, in front of her family. Can she handle her money? Can't she? And once this momentum gets started, we then get into the next level of investigation and evaluation and review, and that's where we are now. The question for you is this. Define for me a standard which somebody is so deranged, so devoid of any conceivable mentation, degree of reality, that a court has to come in and should come in and remove their ability to be free, to act in free. Now, let's assume there is this line. You're running out into traffic nude at 3 o'clock in the morning, risking your life and others. There you go. That's what I'm not saying any Britney Spears has done that, but I'm just saying let's assume you've shown violence, criminal conduct, violence, threatening people, threatening to kill people. Certainly if there is involved in levels of ingestion of drugs and the like, where people need to be removed and to put into some type of an observational position, I understand that. But let's assume you go all the way to the end of that line before you traverse it. You're not hurting anybody. You're having conversations, but you're acting weird. Do you know how many people in the world of Hollywood, music, who's not weird, but yet somehow that weirdness works for them? I am not suggesting that Bob Dylan is mentally unfit, but he's weird. And always, I thought, was quirky weird, but not. I don't know Bob Dylan. It could be an act for all I know, but all I know is you would see him and others. You would see rockers, Ozzy Osbourne, and whoever these people are who say things. And remember when Joaquin Phoenix was on David Letterman, whether that was a work or not, I don't know. But we accept it because they're famous. But they haven't traversed any line yet. They act weird. Sometimes they may be inappropriate. Sometimes they may be inappropriate in terms of what they say, whether sexually or what have you. Please be very, very careful before you say, we want her under observation. We want her liberty to be retracted, removed. We want her liberty to be significantly vacated by some court. And the chances for someone to unscrupulously try to seize the assets and the spending power of some rich person who's acting a bit daft. Did you ever see Grey Gardens? One of my favorite, Little Edie, you know what I mean? Were they one could say raccoons in your home. Now, changing the subject, when it comes to insanity in the criminal justice system, I know a lot about this. We have this rule called the McNaughton rule, and the McNaughton rule works as follows. If you are unable to differentiate between right and wrong, you don't know the difference between right and wrong, you can, a jury, if a jury agrees with this assessment, can find you not guilty by reason of insanity, NGRI, and you are acquitted, and you are taken away and put into some type of a facility, and when you are, if you are ever relieved of that inability to think clearly or whatever, you're then you're released. John Hinckley. David Hinckley. No, John Hinckley. I get so confused. We had a writer, this poor man. He wrote a radio column named David Hinckley. Even Trump even called him one time. Everybody, for the Daily News, would go, David Hinckley, David Hinckley. And people would always say, well, David Hinckley tried to kill Ronald Reagan. He said, I never. He was very, very mild-mannered. And anyway, John Hinckley. John Hinckley, who was found not guilty by reason of insanity because the standard was the DC standard and it was so low. Oh, they have different standards. It was the diminished capacity, the ALI-ABA, the Durham test, the diminished capacity defense, the disease mind test. They all different. But the McNaughton rule is pretty much this rule that says if you do not know the difference between right and wrong, and here's the problem with that. Here's the problem. Sometimes there have been people who have said to their defense counsel, they say, why did you push this person in front of the train, in front of the subway? Did you know it was wrong? He said, yes, I knew it was wrong, but the voices told me to do it. The standard for insanity doesn't apply to that because you knew it was right from wrong, but you couldn't you couldn't act accordingly. You were compelled by something else. The layers, the colors, the textures of mental illness are beyond anything that we can even remotely understand in terms of how complex it is and how complex the issue is, the problem, and the like. And there's a part of me that gets very, very, I'm very sensitive about this issue because one of the reasons is that being in New York, I see people exhibit behaviors, and these are not necessarily people in the street, but people in the street and others who need some form of immediate intervention. In the meantime, we call them homeless, and we lock these people up. And yes, they are committing crimes, but they are committing crimes, and they are homeless, not because of some predisposition to some antipathy to living in a home, but because they're mentally ill. And it's something that we don't want to get to. And here's another issue. This is another problem. In the 70s, 60s, when we de-institutionalized people, there were places where you could take these people, these citizens, human beings, and confine them and treat them, some exhibiting and presenting levels of psychosis that are off the charts. And there were places, Creedmoor and Bellevue and others, that actually allowed you to keep them. And some would say to warehouse them. Warehousing it wasn't to warehouse and forever keep them away, but keep them safe, keep them in an institution, keep them in a structured environment where they cannot walk out and try to negotiate the labyrinth of the world and end up in a street or on corners or sleeping over subway grates because of they're hearing voices and with no medication, no treatment, no nothing. And there's also this concomitant anti-psychiatry movement, and you've heard people say it. Whenever somebody sometimes is involved in a shooting, people will ask the question, were they on some type of psychotropic medication at the time, and were they coming off of said psychotropic medication, some SSRI, something at the time, and therefore was either the being on the medication or coming off the medication, were those involved in this particular type of behavior? And the issue is, that is most often lost, the issue is that they were on a psychiatric medication. And who is on a psychiatric medication? People who are psychiatrically affected, or who are suffering and exhibiting and presenting psychiatric manifestations of problems. It wasn't the medication, it was what brought you to the medication in the first place. So, when I see this Brittany Spears case, I understand what's going on, and I understand she is acting sometimes daft and frightening, and she's inappropriate. But you tell me, define for me, what is inappropriate, and if it were anybody else but Britney Spears, would anybody care? If Britney Spears were scantily clad, talking to herself, acting foolish in front of a bathroom mirror or in an Instagram channel or whatever it is, would that in any way surprise you? Is that rare? Is that beyond the realm of usual? And the answer is no. Let us be very careful, exceedingly careful, before we start saying, okay, we're going to take you away. Now, let's also not be reluctant to realize that there are some people who really need help. And that is a long-term, very expensive, and a very involved commitment on the part of city, state, federal government. Because there are people out there who are human beings that, by the way, can just be swept up and disappeared in systems where you just don't notice where they are. We've seen people here in New York for years. I've seen people on the corner, and one day they're gone. Nobody goes looking for them. Nobody even knows their name. Nobody. And my mother always said something to me. She says, remember, whenever you see somebody like that, remember that at one point in their life, they were a cute little baby. They were a little baby. They were a person who had all of the potential that every other child has, and had idiosyncratic, cute behavior, and then something happened. So I've given you about 4 or 5 different separate subjects with underneath, subsumed within the rubric of mental illness, vis-a-vis Britney Spears. But please, yes, she has access to people. But let me tell you something. Before you start talking about conservatorships, and before you start talking about people coming in to do things for her own good, make sure you've got a conservatorship on the conservatorship to make sure those people who are actually looking out for her best interest are in fact looking out for her best interest. Because the potential for victimization by the unscrupulous is off the charts. Okay? Think about that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this. Please subscribe to this channel. Please hit that little bell, that notification sign or signal, so you'll be notified of new videos and the like. And also, if you have a unique participatory story, please comment. Write your thoughts below. We'd love to read them. And as I say, comment as you see fit.